Beginning our Daf Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf. We begin on the second of the wide lines with the next Mishnah. Again, continuing the theme of the previous Mishnah is Habaseicher as a Pailim. We spoke of someone hires a worker, so then there are times that a worker could eat from Minig Medina, times he could eat because of Paisik, what you make up, and sometimes is from Halacha Midairaisa, as the Torah talks about Kisarva B'Kem Re'echana, and our Mishnah continues on that regarding the eating of the workers. And throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf are kaitis adam. A person can make up, and we spoke about this on the previous daf, which in greater detail, that a person could say that I want to have money in lieu of the food I'm allowed to eat when he's working. The question is, for whom could he do that for, and whom can he not do that for, regarding other family members. Shemi Paris, the halacha of someone who's guarding Paris, is that considered as a Shemi Ko'isa Maisadami? When you're watching, is that, we know the halacha of the pasuk, as we discussed in the previous dafim, is when you're doing the actual work itself, is guarding considered Ko'isa Maisadami or not, to say that you would be biblically allowed to eat from the produce. Then we continue with the halacha of the next Mishnah, continue on this theme of the Shemim, Arba Shemim. There's 4 types of custodians, guardians in the Torah. Shemer Chinam, if he doesn't get paid, Shayil, he gets all the benefit, he just borrows and he gives it back. And he's a sacher, he's getting paid to watch, and sacher is a renter. The halacha of ha'oinus, what happens when it's beyond control, what's qualified as ha'oinus, which is not to get not to inchi. If a guy watched the way people normally watch it, would that be sufficient? Or do you say that no, I'm paying you because I'm expecting you to do more than just the basics? What happens if someone was originally negligent, but actually the liability didn't happen through a negligence, ended up being ba'inus, is that chayiv or not? And what's included in that category? Listim the difference between regular bandits and armed bandits, regarding the halacha of Geneva Veda and regarding that of Oinus. And if you brought it to a place where wild animals are there, then there's more of a pshia than just if wild animals come to where you are. So we begin the current daf Tzadi Gimel, second line of the wide line, says the Mishnah, a person could arrange for himself that he wants payment in lieu of eating the produce, which the Torah lets him eat the produce. And he could do this, he could do it for his adult children who have a job somewhere, working on a farm. He could do this for his adult male and female servants. He could do it for his wife. And the reason is, all of them have intelligence, they have mental capacity to waive this right, and he could make this arrangement for these individuals. But he cannot make this arrangement for his minor children, not for his minor male and female slaves, not for his animal, which the Torah explicitly says you're not allowed to muzzle the animal when it's working. They don't have intelligence, and therefore they cannot waive, and he cannot do this for him, their right to eat the food minat Torah. Continues the Mishnah on these halachas. If someone hires workers, and we spoke about this in greater detail in the previous stuff. He has a tree which is in the 4th year, which the halacha is that it cannot be eaten because it has to be brought to within the walls of Yerushalayim. And now he has workers working in it, so they can't eat, although the Torah allows them to eat, but not from a davar iser like a neteravai. Now, if he didn't let them know beforehand, they thought they were all excited to be working on the farm today, they can be eating, they're going to get their breakfast, lunch, and supper. Then it's like a mekach tais we said in the previous stuff. He has to redeem it, which you could redeem. Meiser Sheni and Menteravai has the same halachas, and then he feeds them those fruits because now the sanctity was removed from the food to the money. What happens if Nisparsu Igulov? He hires workers because he had these cakes of dried figs that they came apart, or Nitpatchu Chabiyasav. He had these barrels of wine that got opened, and he needs them to close the barrels, or he needs them to put the figs back together as a cake. In these situations, they're not allowed to eat because they were already processed and they're already obligated meiser, and now they're just putting it back together again. That you can't partake because it's a chiv meiser. Now, and it's only up until it's nigmar l'meiser, as we explained in previous dafim. Now, if he didn't let them know and they're all excited they're going to be eating figs today or drinking wine, ma'aser machil has to take the tais off and then he has to feed them from that produce or from that wine. Shomer peiros, those who are just watchmen for produce, they eat from it, but that's only mehilchas medina. That's just because that has how the custom has already been. But this is not permissible. This is not included in the halacha that requires you minat Torah. Now, we explained everything in the Mishnah in the previous daf. The one thing that we didn't is the last line of this Mishnah, which the Gemara discusses. Shoymei Peiris. This halacha of the one who's watching the produce. Omarav, he qualifies as teaching. He says, Loishan, we didn't learn that the Shomer does not eat. He does not have the rights minat Torah. It's only a minig Medina. That was only said El Shomer Guinness Pardesin. Someone was watching by a garden, by an orchard, where the fruits are attached to the ground, at a time that's not Gemar Malacha. It's not, no one's harvesting anything right now. Oh, we already explained this in the opening of this parak. So therefore, minat Torah, meaning a previous Mishnah, therefore, minat Torah, the worker's not allowed to eat. Because we say you only eat by its Gemar Malacha, El Kel Yichol, and it's B'shas when you're putting in the stuff into the kelim. But that's what the Mishnah is saying. He eats Mehilchas Medina. Now, for sure, if he would be doing something when it's attached to the ground, let's say he's weeding, of course then, although previous Gemara had discussed when you're weeding you don't eat, that's only minat Torah. But Rashi is explaining that Mehilchas Medina, of course you would, because even just watching it when it's attached you eat, for sure when you'd be doing something. So it says Rav, when did we say that you cannot eat minat Torah by Paris? That's when you're watching by Guinness and Pardesin. Avol shoym legitus ve'aremois. But if let's say you're guarding by the olive press or the wine press, by the piles of the produce, where it's by the time of Gemar Malacha, it's not finished Gemar Malacha for Meiser, because once Gemar Malacha for Meiser, then it's already too late. Oh, then Oichlin Minat Torah. Then they would actually eat even from the biblical rights, like someone who actually does an action when it's attached, like by the harvesting. Because Kesava Rav holds Mishamer Kaisa Maisadami. Guarding is like doing an action. So just like when you're doing an action, when it's B'shas Gemar Malacha, before it's Nigma Lamaisa, the Allah is Minat Torah you eat, okay, Mishamer, which is by the Gisois and the Aremois, when it's detached, you eat Minat Torah. This halacha of Minig Medina is only said by Guinness and Pardesim, those produce which are attached, which biblically you don't have a right, it's only from the minig. Fine. That's how Rav holds. Shmuel Amei says no. We didn't learn that they at least eat Mehilchas Medina, that we allow you from at least minig to eat, is Eloshem Regitus Varemois, is only by when you're guarding it by the wine press, by the pile of produce, which is detached. And you're just watching. But if you're watching by the gardens and the orchard which it's attached, no, they don't need loy minat Torah v'loy mehilchas Medina. Not from the Torah for sure, not because it's not shas gemar malacha, and not even from mehilchas Medina. Why? Because somebody holds mishamach lav koisem ma'asadami. When you're guarding something, it's not like you're doing an action, so therefore, there's no eating over here. If someone was doing an action by the when it's the talush, when it's by the gitis varemois, there's no eating minat Torah over there. That okay, rabbinically will let you. That's the minig of Medina. That's when we let you by gisas varemois. Rav holds no gisas varemois. I don't need a minig over there to let you eat. that's the minat Torah. That's when it's talush. And I just guarding? Yeah, but guarding is kaisa ma'is. Shmuel says, no. Guarding is not like a oisa ma'isa. The Torah doesn't give you any rights over there. So when did we need the minig Medina to allow you was by gitas v'aremais? But when it's mechuber, for haste, there's nothing over there that should let you go ahead and eat it, not even from the minig hamakam. Is there enough gemina for the minig Medina or minat Torah? Yeah, well, I guess it would depend on if there's a minig or not. Also, you have to know if it depends on like Mishalehu Eichel or Mishal Shemaim Eichel. I'd imagine that would also be relevant. Also, if it could be enforced, if you have a suffix, it could be a suffix deraisa, or if it's going to be a suffix of minig, that would probably also be relevant. So the Gemara asks on Shmuel, Master Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. So Shmuel holds that Mishamer is Lav Koisa Maisadami. And again, therefore, this halacha was only said when you're watching Megitis Varemes. When you're watching Gindis Bardesim, there's no rights to eat at all. However, we learned in a bryce like this: Hamashame es hapara. If someone is watching the para aduma from when it's slaughtered up until when you gather the ashes, the halacha is metami begodim. The one who's watching this process to make sure it's done right, the garments on him become tamei, like the Mishnah teaches himself the para. Whoever's engaged in the para aduma from the beginning to the end, their garments become tamei. Says the Gemara, if you say Mishama Lav Koisa Maisadami, if you say like Shmuel, the guarding is not like you did anything. Am I metam begodim? Why does it contaminate his garments? Gondish Geton. If you said Koisa Maisa, okay, you were involved in the procedures, in the process. So obviously you see like Rav, not like Shmuel. Rabbi Ula says, no, it's a Gezerah Shem Yazba Aver. It's a rabbinic decree. Rabban V'Geizer, Tuma, it's not Midairaisa. It's that we're concerned that he might move like a limb when they're burning it. He might push it into the fire to make sure he might do something that's involved. So rabbinically, but you're right, Midairaisa, it's Lav Koisa Maisa Dami. But the Gemara continues asking on Shmuel Masar of Kana for the following brisa. Hamishamir arba v'chamish mikshois. If someone is guarding 4 or 5 areas, squash fields of 5 different people, the halacha is arizulo yimali kreisim echamim. He cannot fill up his belly from one of them. I mean, even though there's a worker who's allowed to eat, it's el mikolecha ve'echad oichel lefi chashman. Each and every one, you should be proportionate. You should be eating an equal amount from them all. Okay, but says the Gemara, one who's guarding is not like he's doing action. Why is he eating in the first place? But you said, Shmuel, when you're watching when it's attached, even from Elchas Medina you don't need. Obviously, that watching is like doing an action. And they could eat at least from Elchas Medina, like we learned in the Mishnah, according to Rav. So the inference is, when you're watching when it's detached, then you would even eat midiraisa, not just from the minig. Not like Shmuel. So Rabbi Shloimy says, no, we're not talking about where it's attached. It's Bakurat Shanu. We're actually talking about where the squash is actually uprooted from the roots. And therefore, says Rashi, that's actually why we call it mikshoyis, and we don't call it kishon, because he's watching it when it's detached. Then you're right, you eat from Hilchas Medina, like we learned in the Mishnah, according to Shmuel, because actually Misham is lav koisa maisa dami. But if you were doing a maisa, you actually would eat minat Torah. Now that it's he's just watching. So okay, from the minig, hamadina is what you're allowed to eat. Says Akurin, really? It's detached. But if that's the case, then it's ready to be typed already. Then it's already too late because there's nothing else to do for a process for cucumbers, for squash. If it's other things like wheat, you have to still thresh. There's still stuff to do. But here it's already nigma la'maisa. Then you shouldn't be allowed to eat. Says no, shleinitel pikash alehem. Their blossom on the top has not been taken off. And the Gemara said in Daf Peches Mabeis that kishu and mishipaksu, that by squash is only when you take off the blossom that's nigma malach lamaisa, and that's why if you did an action you'd be allowed to eat. Now that he's just watching, which is not with an action, so he cannot eat minat Torah, but that's where we're saying the halach is he would eat from the minig of Medina. And actually, Amar Vashi says now that we did not refute Shmuel, it's actually logical like Shmuel, that when you're doing something, when it's attached to the ground, at a time that there's no Gemar Malacha, not like Rav, that even Mehilchas Medina you cannot eat. For sure, when you're just watching when it's attached, which is a time when it's not Gemar Malacha, and you didn't do an action, and therefore our Mishnah must be talking about when you're guarding it when it's detached, which was the case of the Gitis Varemos, not like Rav said, that it's going on Shemiginis Badesin. What's the inference? Because now we learned in the previous Mishnah, Pezayim and Aleph. Mishnah said over there, the following individuals have a biblical right to eat, meaning contrast to the earlier Mishnahs in our parak that spoke about that when you make up with the guy or certain minhagim, says, oh, these could eat from the Torah gives them rights to eat, which is karka. If someone is working on something that's attached to the ground, b'shas k'mar malacha, at the time when it's the end of the work, when like harvesting, okay, that's when you get to eat. Regarding detached produce, we had different qualifications. But the inference like this, you tell me these eat minat Torah. The inference is that there are those who don't eat minat Torah, el mechas Medina, only from the halacha of that's the common custom that it's in that country. From the fact that we didn't say elo eichlin, you should have just said these people eat. Why saying elo eichlin minat Torah? The inference is that there are those who do eat, but just not minat Torah. Now, what are those cases? So there has to be either that it's attached at a time when it's not Gemar Malacha, or detached at a time when it is Gemar Malacha. Because you tell me these eat min Torah when it's mechuber b'shas Gemar Malacha. So the inference would be, well, which ones are not as high level of min Torah, only for the minimum Medina? It would be attached, not Gemar Malacha, or detached when it is Gemar Malacha, or something that doesn't grow from the ground, which is again not included in the halacha min Torah, but that you would say would be milchas Medina. Now, but aim a sefer. But then look at the Mishnah, the next words in the Mishnah. On that Peizayin we had a Mishnah. It said ve'ilu she'in oichel, and then it says, oh, and these guys they don't eat. Now, my ein oichel, when you tell me these that you're about to mention that they don't eat, everything it means to say that they don't eat from Torah, right? But they eat from the custom of the country, right? And the Reisha. That's already the decad from the Reisha. You don't have to spell it out. Allah, brother, isn't it obvious? Isn't it obvious that they don't eat not from the Torah, not from the Medina? And what does the Mishnah count? If you're even doing when it's attached to the ground, when it's not the end of the process yet, you're not harvesting yet. Oh, so the Makolshkin showing the Guinness Badesis. Then for sure, when you're guarding a garden and an orchard, for sure you're not going to eat, which is like Shmuel, not like Rav. Rav translated our Mishnah that Mechas Medina you do eat. So obviously, now when the Reisha said that these people eat Minat Torah, it was coming to tell us that there are others that eat, but not Minat Torah, must be talking about when you were watching that it's detached by the Gitus V'Aremos, by the wine press and by the piles, until it wasn't Nigma Malachta Lamaisa. So since you didn't do an action, so you can't eat Minat Torah, but you'll eat Mechas Medina. Because if you're watching when it's attached, that you cannot explain, because even if you did an action literally, we're learning in the Seifa that you don't need it at all if it's not Gemar Malacha. For sure when you're just watching, which is like Shmuel, not like Rav. So therefore, that's what the Gemara was saying, says Rav Ashi, that the Mishnah seems to be clear, like Shmuel, that the halacha was only said by Shomer, by Tolush, because Shomer is lav ka'isa ma'asadami, and not like Rav who wanted to say that Shomer is ka'isa ma'asadami. Get the halacha, the next Mishnah, continuing this theme of the Shomer, which we're talking about over here with the workers and those who are watching. So there are four types of custodians. Shomer Chinam, the unpaid custodian, Vashayel, a borrower, Nisi Sacher, a paid custodian, Vaseicher, and a renter. And the Mishnah explains all these types of Shomer. So Shomer Chinam, the unpaid custodian, Nishba ala kol. He swears regarding whatever happened that's written by all the other Shomerim that they're chayiv. He swears that happened. It was stolen. It was lost. Whatever it was, it died, and he's gonna be pater. The Gemara later on the Sheld of Tzadik Dalet Amad Beis, the next parak is going to learn out our whole Mishnah from Psukim. But this is what the Mishnah is saying, that he swears on everything, meaning whatever, not everything, because for Peshia he's chayiv, but he swears regarding whatever everyone else is chayiv on, he's pater on. V'nois is sacher, v'ashoyel. However, the borrower, Mishalem Esakar, he pays for everything, meaning whatever is mentioned in the Psukim, for if it's stolen, if it's lost, if it's an einus, something beyond his control, he has to pay for all these. So he's the opposite extreme. But the guy who gets paid for watching, or the guy who's renting, they're nishboim ala shvura. They swear that if it broke, or ala shvuya, if it got taken captive, or ala meso, if it died, they swear and they're exempt because those are einsim, and they're pater and einsim. But in Mishal they pay if it's lost, or got lost, or if it got stolen. So the Gemara says, Mantana, who's the town of our Mishnah that Abba Shomrim, that there are four types of custodians? So Rav Nachman Rabbi says, Remeir, it's Remeir. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Amalei Rabbi Rav Nachman says, Mi ikid the less Abba Shomrim. Is there someone who doesn't hold these four types of Shomrim? Obviously, there's four types of Shomrim that we see. So what are you saying? Who's the one? It's Remeir, as if someone disagrees on this. So Amalei, no. This is what I was telling you. Mantana, who's the town of our Mishnah? That Seicher is Kanoisi Sacher, that the renter has the halacha like a paid custodian, which the Mishnah taught by both of them, that you're pater from einus and you have to pay if it's stolen or lost. On that, I'm saying it's Remeir, as the Gemara continues to explain that it's Remeir who holds like that. It says Gemara, really? But Remeir Ibchashaminle. Remeir actually says the exact opposite of what you just said. You're telling like Lena Bryce, it's a machlekes. How does the renter pay? The renter has qualified like the unpaid custodian. Rabbi Yehuda the one that holds like he's the paid custodian is chayv and aveda. So how can you say our Mishnah is like a mayor? So says the Gemara because Rabbi Abu Ipchakatan he actually learned that brisa the exact opposite. Rabbi Abu learned that the brisa when it says Seicher, how does it pay? It's Remei who says like a Shem Esacher, which is like the way our Mishnah says it, and Yehuda says like a Shem Mechinam. But then the Gemara says, if that's the case, Arba, what are you saying that there's 4 Shemim, Shleishin in there? They're really 3 because you tell me that the Seicher is like a Shem Esacher, which Taisa points out, this Ihachi is not like it normally is translated like I Amrit B'Shleim, like, oh, if you're going to say, it's not really true. It's not dependent on what the Gemara just said. It's a general question on anyone. Taisa says you find that many times that Ihachi is not, doesn't mean that. And it's just a general question that asking that, how are you saying that there's Dalet Shemim? There seems to be only 3. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak, he says, yes, Dalet Shemim, there's 4 custodians, v'dinim, shleisha, but there's only 3 halachas because the Seicher will have the halacha even like a Shem Echinam or like a Shem Esacher. The Gemara brings a story relating to the liability of the Shemim. Ahu Raya. There was a shepherd, a custodian, that he had animals that he was shepherding, aguded in the Har Papa, by the edge of the river Papa. One of them slipped, and it fell into the water. He came from the Rabbi Patre. Rabbi says, you're exempt, you're not liable for the owner of the animal. Because Amay said, what should he have done? As a continued Beis, he watched it the way people watch it. So, as Rashi explains, this is not even Geneva Vaveda. It's not like, like it got lost, like it's like you should have been more careful, like because when things get lost, what do you want me to do? It got lost. No, you should have been more careful. This is not like you should have been more careful. This is like an einus. There's no reason to expect an animal to slip and fall into the river. However, Abaye says, wait a second. Your wording, Hanatika Denati Inchi, threw me off, says Abaye. You mean to say if a guy does like what everyone else does, he's suddenly exempt? So I have the following question. Let's say the shepherd went into town at a time when people normally go into town. Kidanatri Inchi. Achanami the Pater? Is he going to be Pater if something happens to his flock while he went into town for his lunch break? He says yes. He says, I don't understand. Gana Porta, let's say he took a little nap out in the fields. When the other people sleep. Achanami the Pater is going to be exempt? He says yes. No, Pater from the liability. He's Pater from the fact you would say that it's Gneva Vaveda. It's like this. That's not oinus. He says no. That's considered like oinus. So what do you want me to do? I'm doing like what everybody else does. However, Esvei the Gemara asks from the following brisa. The brisa says that Elohim oinsin. What's considered an oinus, something beyond the control Shoshem Esacha Patalein, that a paid custodian is exempt for? And like what it says a pasuk in Eve, it says Vatipol Shava Vatikachem, which Rashi in Eve translates. It's that they went and they waged war of the Malchus Shava on them. And the youth, they hit them according to the sword. Meaning, like, what were they supposed to do? They came and an armed attack, basically, is what the pasuk is saying. And that's what the Bride is saying. That's considered einus. So how are you considering a guy who took a nap and then suddenly one of the sheep got lost or whatever this and that that's an einus? An einus is like it's something like an armed attack or like bandits. How could you? That's an unavoidable calamity. How could you say this? Amalei says no. That brisa that's giving such a higher standard of what an einus is bechazani masa. That's talking about by the town's watchmen. They have to watch the town at nighttime. The whole town is relying. You hired a private security company to watch your bodies and your money. They have a higher level of protection required. But a regular shimer, no, a shimer sacha does not have such a high level, and the einus would be even if he went in to take a lunch break or took a nap like everybody else. The Gemara says, the Gemara asks from the following brisa. Until how long? What's the extent of how much a paid custodian has to watch something? Says the brisa. I'll tell you how far. Ad kedei, like it says in Bereshis, that Yaakov was telling Lavan, I was b'yom during the daytime, I was eating the heat. The kerch balayla, I was eating ice and snow at nighttime. Meaning, Hashem is getting paid. You got to do the job. I don't care what's going on. The elements boiling hot to 103 today. You got to watch this. You got to do it. So that's a pretty high level. How can you tell me a guy taking naps and the guy's eating his lunch break and something goes into the coffee shop and he leaves the sheep outside and somebody steals it? You didn't. That can't be an oinus. Says Gemara Amalei. No, he says not true. This Bryce that's saying that your responsibility as a paid watchman, as a paid employee is so high. That's a guy who's doing for the whole town. But a regular shayman does not have it. Says the Gemara. But Amalei said to him, "Oto Yaakov Avinu Chazan Masahava." What Yaakov Avinu was the town watchman, where he was working for his father-in-law. How could you say he was the town watchman, and that's what the Bryce is qualifying? So he says yes, because the Amalei Lavan, Yaakov is telling Lavan not to be lachan tirusi say nosa kachazani masa. This was when Yaakov was explaining to Lavan, you cheat, you think I didn't work for you. I did the watching the way a town watchman does. That's how high of a level I did it, but it doesn't mean the Bryce that's sourcing this is going on Chazani Masa. A regular Shayman, no, does not have to watch it so much. And it says Rava, and this is only higher levels. The Gemara says, the Gemara asks from the following Brysa: Roya shoya roya. You have a shepherd that was shepherding, and he left the flock, comes into town. So while he's in town playing some backgammon by his lunch break, a wolf comes in and tears apart one of the sheep and runs off. A lion comes and pounces, which Rashi just explains the different terminology. A lion, its normal is to tear apart an animal where it finds it. The wolf, on the other hand, it tears apart the living animal and brings it where it's confident, and that's where it kills it. So it's just different terminology. But the point is, says the Braisa, the gear says in oimdim, but really should be in oimrim. We don't say Ilo hayisham, had he been there hayamatzel, he would be able to save, and therefore he's guilty. No, so we evaluate him. If he would have been there, he could have saved, then he's chayv. If he wouldn't be able to save anyway, he's not taking on a lion, so pater, even he's going to be exempt. But says the Gemara, my love, isn't it talking about the old be'idne daili inshi, that he went in to take a lunch break when everyone else goes in to take a lunch break? In other words, and you see that even so, he's going to be chayiv if he could have saved it. But what do you mean? Why? What do you mean? Of course, when you're napping, you also could have saved, but you're allowed to nap. You're allowed to go in for lunch. So why are you going to be chayiv? It seems to be not the way Rabbah said it. Says the Gemara, no. The alba in the deloy inshi. The Bryce is talking about when he went in, not during when people normally do. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, I understand the case when he's going to be chayiv now. But am I potter? Now I don't understand the case. You told me when, if he couldn't have saved from the lion, let's say it was a lion. Let's say you do a lion. If I was there, I couldn't have done anything anyway. So we say, okay, fine, then you can be potter. But wait, if you tell me that he went in at a time when he's not allowed to go in, so why is he potter in that case? Even if that's an einis, but this is what's called tchilasa b'pshia. Your initial thing was a negligence. Which, why was it negligence? Because any little thing that would have happened, that damage you could have saved, but you left him and you just took time off and you just was schmoozing on the phone with somebody else, which you had no right at that time. That's a negligence. So even though the end also, when there was a very strong damage that came to it, which had he been the red, he couldn't have saved it, therefore that would have been ba'inus, it would have been beyond his control. But however, the beginning was a pshia, and therefore you should be chayiv, because that's how we pass in Allah and Amafkin and Avmin Bezim and Alf. Chilas b'pshia v'sei ba'inus is chayiv. So who cares that it ends up being an einus? If you went in at a time you're not supposed to, you should be chayiv. Says the Gemara, we're talking about the shama kol aryeh ba'al. What happened was, you're right, he didn't go at a time when he's allowed to go out. The reason why he left, however, he heard the voice of a lion, and he left because he was afraid, which was an einus. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. If that's the case, so then you tell me that when he was away, and then something happened, we evaluate him. Oh, if he could have saved, he's going to be liable. Why? What should he have done? He heard the sound of a lion. Says, no, it's not true, because that he could have led the other shepherds in fending off an attacker. He could have gotten other shepherds and sticks, and therefore, had he been able to save, he'd be chayiv. So Gemara says, I can't understand. And why are you telling me that this halacha of the Braisa is talking about a paid custodian, a shepherd who has a job, And even an unpaid custodian also should be chayiv, because the master is the one who says, if you have an unpaid custodian who, let's say he's a lion, but if he would have gotten all the other shepherds with all the sticks, he could have fended off the animal. But like Kidman, he didn't. Chayiv is chayiv. So why talking about specifically a shepherd who's a paid custodian? It says, what? Yeah, exactly, because you could have fended them off. Says the Gemara, no, a shem echinam, you're right. He has to fend off the wild animal only bechinam, only for free. He doesn't have to hire people to come help him. Shemesachar b'schar. However, a paid custodian has to pay, and this would have required a situation of paying, and therefore that's why we're saying it specifically with a shepherd that gets paid. And va'ad kama, how much does he have to pay to hire people to help him to fend off the wild animal? Ad kedei demand, up until the value of the animal that he's watching. If his animal is watching worth $500, he has to spend up until $500 to hire workers to help him to fight off the lion that's coming to eat up. So it says the Gemara. But first the Gemara asks a question. Where do we find that a paid custodian is liable for an einis, that you're imposing this responsibility for him to hire other people? There's a lion over here, which is an einis. You're expecting him to hire other people from his own pocket to fight against the lion, but that's an einis, and he shouldn't be chayav to lose money on that. Says no, the hadashakal mem balabayas. He's allowed to go ahead and get reimbursed by the owner. So then the Gemara says, I don't understand. If that's the case, you're telling me that if the animal is worth $500, he has to spend up until $500 to save the animal. So if that's the case, and you tell me he gets reimbursed from the owner, so what does the owner benefit for you to spend money up until the value of an animal, if anybody's not getting anything out of it?
Not just that, what happens if he spends money, it's not much there. The owner's going to say, I don't have to give you anything. He didn't do what he wanted to do.
Okay, that you have to know. Maybe that's part of the understanding that he spent it to save the animal, that he gets reimbursed even though it's not successful. But Al Kapan, the Gemara's question is that, okay, you're successful. now the animal is not even mine anymore. What's the purpose? I mean, it's the amount of the animal, it's what I gain. So Gemara says, no, there's two gains. First of all, nafkamin lekushu dechevasa. First of all, that he doesn't have to train his animals anew, because his animals already know the routine. So even though you get a new clean lady for the same amount of money, it's just not worth it, because you got to retrain her over. You got a few months now of like, the socks go here, this is dairy and this is meat. So lekusha dechevasa, for that, even though it's up until the value itself, it's worth it. Or another approach is l'tircha yisei rasa, for an excess effort, meaning that just the effort of trying to buy new animals, not even that regarding their being used to the routine, just effort of putting in to go buy new animals is itself. So therefore, that is, even up until the value would still be, even though the guy's reimbursing you the value of his animal, it's still worth it for him. Now this was all up until from Amid Aleph, the opinion of Rabbah. Rabbah had said that if you have a situation that Natuk Dinantri Inchi, where a guy took a nap, the guy took his lunch break, that's how most people do it. So if something happens, then he's going to be patur. And Abai was asking questions, but he didn't refute him. That was all Rabbah's opinion. However, says the Gemara, Rav Chizda, Rabbi Rav Huna, Lo Yisfilu Had Rabbah. They don't hold of this theory of Rabbah that said, oh, if you watch the way people normally watch, okay, everything else is considered an oynis, you can be patur. No. The Amri, they say, Lahachi Avi Lach Agra. Why do you think I'm paying you for? I want you to watch for me extra, more than what people normally do. So, although it's not a negligence, but it's not an oynis, and therefore it'd be categorically like Aveda, and therefore, if something happened while you were taking a nice little nap in the afternoon, your nice little siesta, you're going to be chayiv, according to Rabbah, to Rav Chizda, Rabbi Rav Huna, not like Rabbah. So the Gemara brings a story relating to this opinions. Bar Ada Sabalah, that was his name, he was having animals pass by on the bridge of Nerish. Now, over this very narrow bridge, one pushed the other one, threw it into the water. So also coming to Rav Papa, Came in front of Rav Papa. Chayve says, you are guilty, you are liable, you have to compensate. So it's very similar, like we said, to the story with Rabbi. Rabbi held he was potter, and the animal slipped in. Here he held that he's liable when the animal pushed it in. Somebody says, Mahaval mebed, what should I have done? That's actually the wording that Rabbi had used, when Rabbi held that if you do kedinat to inchi, you potter, because what should he have done? Somebody says, no, I'm not considering this as an oinus. You should have them go one at a time. Now that you have them all, the whole herd mentality, the whole herd together, and one pushes, that's your liability. So Malay said to him, Yidata be bebar achzich? Do you know by your family, in other words, what he means to say is, by your people, the matil meba chada chada? You think a guy, a shepherd, could take every animal one at a time over the bridge? No one does that. So in other words, trying to say, there should be like an oinus. Malay says, he says, there were already ones that already screamed earlier than you, and no one is paying attention to them. And although you're saying very good, you're saying like, what should I have done? He says it's not relevant. The point is that, as Taisa explains, he wanted to exempt himself in the way Rabbah holds that. This is how people normally do. Why you hold me liable? He says no. Again, because they hold like Rav Papa, that we're saying that like these teachings of Rabbi Avuna, that you're going to be chayiv, and therefore we're not considering this as an oinus. Now, Avoi, afkid kisna beirunya. Avoi deposited linen at the house of Runya. Azul Shabu. So Shabu was the name of the Ganav. He was an armed bandit. He heard about that there's some nice linen in this guy's house. Shamtimine, he took it away from Runya. Now, L'sayif Hukra Ganav. At the end, they recognized who the thief is, this Shabu. So also came in Rav Nachman. So this Runya came in front of Rav Nachman. And Chayve, he said, you have to pay to the owner that you were watching the linen for. Why? Because since we know who stole it, so you're not losing anything. You have to go and put in the effort after the thief until you could get it out from him. But you have to go ahead and compensate this avoi that deposited by you. Says the Gemara, Lema pligid Rav Huna bar Oven. Shall we say that this disagrees with Rav Huna bar Oven? Because the Shalach Rav Huna bar Oven, he sent the following halacha. Nignava ba'inus. If something was stolen beyond the person's control, but then they recognize who stole it. If he's a paid custodian, so unpaid custodian. If he wants to, he could swear that what he wants, it was geneva, vaved, it was ba'inus. I'm potter on those things. Or if he wants to, he can take care of the owner who, in other words, with the payment. And the Rashi explained this is the machlekes, because Runya was a shemechinim. He's watching for free while he was watching the linen from Avoi, and Rav Nachman obligated him to pay. Here we see that Rav Huna bar Oven held that no, he doesn't have to pay. If he wants to, he could take care. But if he wants, he could just swear and get himself off the hook. So we see that seems like he disagrees. Now that was obviously the shemechinam. Shemesachu, if it's a paid custodian, but then he has to go take care of it. He has to get the money from the thief. He can't just swear and get himself off the hook, because although really he might be potter, but once you know who the ganav is, since you're getting paid, you have a higher responsibility. So isn't this a machlekes? Some Rabbi says no, not necessarily a machlekes. Why? Right, that depends if he's getting himself off the hook or not. In other words, if he pays usually if he's taking responsibility, right. That's the Gemara elsewhere speaks about that, right? If maybe we'll see this later on Daf Ches or something. But if a guy takes the responsibility, then usually he gets compensated for doing that. But that only would be in certain situations when you're going beyond the letter of the law. Maybe this is not included in there. But Rabbi says no. The reason why this is not necessarily machlek is because Hasam Gabri de Parmuska, over there in that story, there were police officers that have a kaimi. They were nearby. The Ramakala had this Runya screamed loud, have a asu umatzlanle. They would have came and helped him out. So therefore, that would be considered as a pshia. In other words, this story of Shavur, of the reason why Rav Nachman held him responsible. We see Huna bar Oven held that you don't have to necessarily be busy with Yerusha Bechinam. That's in general. But the case of Runya was worse because he could have screamed and saved it. So therefore, it is his responsibility now when they find the Ganav to go take care of it, and he can't just swear and get himself off the hook. The next Mishnah continues on the theme of what's considered an oinus regarding these shaimrim. So zev echad, if there's only one wolf, ain't a oinus. That's not considered as an oinus. Shnei zevim, there's two wolves. So then oinus, so then it is an oinus, and therefore a shemesacha would be pater. Yudami says it depends. B'shas mishlacha ze'evim, if it's at a time when wild animals are being sent from a decree of Hashem, the King of all kings, that it will just jump on a person, then avziv echad oinus, and even one wolf is considered as an oinus to be pater. Shnei klavim, two dogs, in oinus, it's not an oinus, not beyond your control to fend off two dogs. Yedua habavli and Mishmer Meir says depends. Miruch achas, if the two dogs came from one side, ain't oinus, not an oinus. Mishtei ruchis, they're coming from two different directions, then oinus is considered beyond your control. It's hard to fend off two dogs from two different directions. Halistim, bandits, which Rashi explains is really referring to one bandit. It's already Hari is a oinus, it's considered oinus. Hari, a lion, a doiv, a bear, a number, a leopard, a bardless, which it's Rashi says a polecat, a nachash or a snake. These are all considered animals that are beyond you could. Okay, it could be also a weasel. Potish is a weasel. Could be that's different. Yeah, could be that's another interpretation. But a weasel is such a difficult animal. I guess so. But it's so much. These are wild animals that are very hard to fend off. So that's considered as an oinus. Now, Amosai, when did we say this is an oinus? That's only talking about if they came by themselves. But if you brought your animals to places where the wild animals and the bandits are, the oinus don't come into the wild west and complain that the gunslinger is going to come and take your animals. Now, Mesa Gedarka, if an animal died the normal way, Ariza oinus, that's oinus. But Sagfa, if he afflicted it by starving it, or he had it stand in the summertime in the heat, or in the wintertime in the cold, to afflict it, which then a Mesa, and then it dies, ain't oinus, that's not an oinus, which says that's so pashid. Of course, that's a pshia gemura. Says Taisa, the bottom Taisa says, no, the chiddush is that even if you could suspend it, say maybe he died from something else, even so you can be chayiv because you shouldn't have afflicted it. And if you did, then you're really not an oinus and you can be chayiv. Now, also l'roshi tzukin benaflov. Let's say the animal, the Gemara explained this already in Pahamafkan Daf Mabez, that it forcibly went up to the cliff, which is a very pointy and high mountain. Benafla nefel. He couldn't. There was nothing he was able to do to stop the animal. But But if he brought the animal up to a cliff and the fell and died, it's not an again because you brought it over there, so that's not an excuse. Now the Gemara asks regarding the halacha of the wolf. But Tanya, but we learned that Brisa that zeib echad oinus, that actually one wolf is an oinus. How could our Mishnah say that it's not an oinus, only two wolves? So Nachman Yitzchak says hahi b'shas mashlacha zeib. This Brisa that said one wolf is a oinus was talking about when there's obviously some type of a situation from Shemayim that wolves are attacking people. But Yehuda, he says when it's that type of situation, even one wolf would be an oinus. Now the Mishnah said halista mariza oinus, that when there's bandits, that's considered as a oinus. Says Gemara, why? Loki gavra lahadigav, it's one against one. So why he should be able to fend off one bandit? He's the one shomer. So Merabi says, no, we're talking about ballistic mezuyin. We're talking about an armed bandit. Guy comes with weapons. That's a different story. That's considered oinus. So the following question: listim mezuyin. What happens if the bandit is armed, but v'roy mezuyin and the shepherd is armed? Now what's the halacha? As the Gemara explains the question, do we say uki gavel hadigaver? Okay, it's one against one, and therefore he should be chayiv. It shouldn't be considered oinus. Or no, hay maser nafshe. The bandit, he's coming with that intention to kill or get killed, and to get the money. So he's ready to give up his life. But the shepherd, he's not willing to give up his life for watching this animal. So maybe that would be considered as oinus. Says the Gemara, it's logical that the bandit is willing to give up his life and not the shepherd, and that's considered as an oinus for the shepherd. So he says, what happens if the shepherd encounters the thief before he takes anything from him, and he exaggerates and he mocks. V'amalein, he says to the bandit, "Gan v'sarya, you putrid, you disgusting, you loser ganav." Beduchta plan Yizvin, he's talking trash to him. He says, "You know what? This is where we're staying, as you turn top of Tzalid Amid Aleph, and kach v'kach gavri ikabadan, and this is how many people we have with us, where all our shepherds are. And if you're going to come to try to steal, you're going to die. Kach v'kach kalbe ikabadan. This is how many dogs we have with us. Kach v'kach zuksa. This is how many what's it called again? Slingshots. There's how many slingshots, psikolon, we have set ready for us to be with us wherever we go, and don't even bother coming. You come, you're going to die. And the bandit went to where they're staying, and he took from them. What's the halacha? So Malay said to him, we learned in the Mishnah that although you're putter when a wild animal comes and rips off your animal's head because it's an einis, but we said when you bring your animal to the place of wild animals and bandits, then you can be chayiv. Says Rashi, here you told them the place where the animals are, and you egged them on, and that to say, so that's like taking it, and therefore you actually are going to be chayiv for that situation. Thank you to any time for hosting us.